Awesome. Yeah, so good morning again to everyone. Let me first apologize for blinding everyone with my yellow t-shirt, but hashtag merch representing the brand. But when Debbie had asked me to do this, I think my first thought was, why why would I come and give away all the state secrets? But then I sort of went off the other cliff and kind of said, you know, there's a risk of spending 10, 15 minutes basically stating the obvious. But I think I take a bit of comfort that some of the stuff that I'll touch on was covered by Amani as well. And I've just kind of given a few slides with some thought maps because Devi and Amani said I must do slides like a schoolboy. So I mean, if I just get straight into it, just to leave you with some thoughts. I mean, there's probably three things, let's call them principles, that I'd leave with you in terms of insights. And the first one is really just knowing thy business. And this is really just talking about, building that institutional knowledge. We always hear about building of institutional knowledge. It's generally people who've been in an organization for a very long time, knows all the corners and all the nooks and the crannies. But I think, if you adopt a student-like mindset in terms of how you look at a business, so always learning, always being curious, etc., you can build up the institutional knowledge. And what it helps you to do is just really understand. And when I say know thy business, I'm obviously referring to everything related to. So it's the ins and outs, the environment you're in, your competitive landscape, and so on. I mean, just to give you a sense, if we take MTN as an example, you're looking at, a company with operating in 17 markets, different markets. You've got something like 6 or 7 revenue streams. You've got a platform strategy that's been driven. There's all sorts of ESG related issues, sustainability that you need to be on top of. There's the financial side, there's the legal side, and everything in between. And I think it becomes quite important to be on top of that, as Amani said, when you're building, I guess, credibility with your stakeholders, it becomes important to be seen as an expert in those fields. And it's a lot of stuff that's there. Obviously, different companies have different complexities, but you do need to be inspired somewhat by your circumstances and where you are. So I think that becomes quite critical in terms of how you build your knowledge base or your institutional knowledge of a business. But I think what it does then at the end of the day is enable you to narrate consistent and a credible story. So it helps you to look around a few corners. You don't have to change your story all the time. And I think that just builds a little bit of confidence and consistency with the stakeholder base. So if I go into the next sort of principle of thought, is know thy management, and I use it as a bit of a catch-all. Management, the board, the colleagues and other teams. And I think you do, I've spoken to some of the counterparts, and I think people do struggle with this part, especially when getting this management backing. Because when you are trying to, sort of drive your programs, get them out on the road, get them to conferences, I suppose to a very large extent, they need to have that trust in you, that they're able to kind of follow your lead in terms of the places they need to go. And obviously these calendars are extremely tricky. And what you find is that if you've built that trust sufficiently, you're able to actually get them to start adjusting calendars, etc., to accommodate the program. And I think that's absolutely key. And you kind of do that through ongoing engagement, ongoing dialogue, and as well as building very strong partnerships within the organization. And again, this comes to kind of across the teams. I'm privileged to be able to interact with board members with the permission of my principals. And even then, you have very hard discussions in terms of what you're trying to do in the program. But if you've got the backing of your management, they kind of fight the fight for you within the organization as well as with board members. So it actually sort of greases the wheels in terms of what you're trying to do on the program. And I think that's absolutely critical. I mean, when you talk about the other functions within the organization, I think we in our team at MTN are actually quite privileged that we operate with, or we work with a bunch of superstars in terms of the other functions and the other departments and operations. Because when we look for stuff, when we look for support, we get it without a lot of pushback. Sometimes you get a few complaints, which is natural. But I think having built up that rapport, and this is across the team, our team, so at different aspects of the business. Different team members will build different relationships. And that helps you to kind of get things done. I mean, I'll give you an example. One of my colleagues who I won't name, but it's someone who's generally very measured, doesn't really get upset. And I remember the one Saturday, I think it was like mid-Saturday morning, and he gives me a call. He's like, "Hey, what are your analysts saying?" So he had just gotten an instruction from our CEO to look at an analyst note who had done, again, for protection of the innocent, won't name which one it is, had done some analysis which was actually incorrect. But he was asked to then kind of verify what that calculations and analysis was. And I'm like, well, I told the CEO that that's not quite right, but he was still tasked with doing this thing. So I guess, it was a weekend where he had sort of budgeted that it would be a free weekend. He works quite a few weekends. And this really upset him because he is now expected to do some analysis when he wasn't really planning to. I mean, and it's a two-way street. So you build that sort of rapport, that sort of that confidence in each other, that he has the confidence that he can call me on a Saturday that I thought I had off to work through a few things. And it applies to various departments. I mean, communications is one of the key things we do, obviously, as investor relations. And you have to have a very tight and trusted relationship with your communications counterparts, so our corporate affairs teams. So things like that, when you put forward an ESG proposition, there's a lot of collaboration that comes through when you're marketing or you're trying to promote different operations, different aspects of the business. You need that support that you get from your counterparts. And I think, bringing that all together, it helps you to become a bit of a trusted advisor. So you know that, whenever something is happening, I know Tsulu's my boss, often tells people, what does Thato think of this thing? And she does the same to me. If I ask her something about treasury or tax, they'll send me to the treasury or tax person. So I think that sort of symbiotic relationship, I think, is absolutely key in how you sort of build your position and your relevance within an organization. Um, and then I think the final thought that I'd have with you, obviously, is know thy stakeholder. And I suppose at MTN we deal with a lot of people. I think Mani did show the different markets that we have sort of a presence in terms of our outreach, and you kind of need to understand the nuances there. So do American investors think a certain way, Europeans a certain way, and Asian investors a certain way, and obviously the domestic market a certain way. And I think there are nuances that you kind of learn to sort of understand. You have to take the feedback. Sometimes it's pretty harsh, but I think that's actually the kind of feedback you probably best prefer because it helps you to pivot and drive your messaging, drive your positioning, and how you package your investor relations product. Um, and what's absolutely key as Zamani also pointed out, is that you need to remain engaged in all seasons, as I put it. So whether it's good, whether it's bad, you need to be there. And in fact, probably when it's bad, you need to be there a lot more because you need to provide that comfort, that confidence. And I think it does make a difference because if your share price is going from 10 to 6 rand, the IR role or the IR effort can actually curb those losses to about 8 rand. Obviously, giving you random numbers. But I think there is a difference that IR makes in terms of the environment, particularly when it's difficult. And conversely, on the other side, if the share price is running, you can make it run even further by how you message and provide the confidence and steer. So I think that's absolutely critical. And when you come back to having those relationships with your internal stakeholders, having built up your knowledge, you're able to have interesting conversations. As I said, I think when you have a relationship with your stakeholder where they're happy to give you open feedback, but they're also happy for you to give them the business in terms of where they might be getting things wrong. I think those kind of conversations are absolutely key. It's part of what I enjoy, I think, most about the job is that you have those interesting conversations. You're always learning, and it actually comes back to the other aspects in terms of how you're driving the other two principles. So, if you kind of look at the overall um, ecosystem of what I've just been talking about, you'll see that there's massive interlinkages between all of those principles. So knowing your business is supported by the fact that if you've got managers that back you and are trusting you with information, you learn the business a lot more. But they trust you a lot more if you know the business relatively well. And then, accordingly, as you interact with your stakeholders, you get a lot of feedback. You feed that back into the business, and so on and so forth. So I think there's an interlinkage in between those three concepts. And I think, they do provide a decent, I mean, obviously it's not exhaustive, but I think it provides a bit of a platform or a framework as to how, which certainly how we sort of think about how we drive investor relations at MTN. And that helps you. So when you're doing your sales releases, when you're doing your results, when you're putting together capital markets days, the roadshows, etc., you've got that whole ecosystem as a sort of guide and a steer as to how that's presented. So I think that's really sort of it. And then that's the dream team at MTN. So grateful to be working with these people. You'll see from that picture, we've got Mary Jane, who joined us about a year ago. She's brought all the bubbles and obviously a different aspect in terms of how we do our work from a presentations perspective, communications perspective. Lindiwe supports the team and keeps us in line, makes sure that we don't stray from what we need to be doing. Luyanda obviously is the veteran in the team, and when you talk about institutional knowledge, there's the face of institutional knowledge there, and we happy to invite or to welcome Tessin, who joined us about 2 months ago, I think now. And she brings obviously additional market experience and is going to give us a different perspective as we continue to elevate what we do. Probably should give a special mention to the deserter Zihle, who Debbie, I think, referred to at the beginning. She spent a couple of years with us and obviously has been also important in terms of what we've done. So I think for us, as we do the work that we do spend a lot of time laughing with this team, so that makes things a lot more palatable. It's a team that has a shared vision in terms of what we're doing, driving the excellence, delivering the product, making sure that we're assisting and being relevant within the organization. And I think that sort of begets into the stakeholder interactions and how the stakeholders perceive us. I'll stop there. So thank you for coming to or listening to my TED Talk, as they say.